All right, we are now live streaming on YouTube, everyone.
All right, and it doesn't appear that Alex has audio yet. So it might just be a conversation with you and I, Gretchen, for a minute. Oh, I saw the mute go off. Are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Gretchen. I could hear you say hi, but I don't know what happened to my audio, and I'm still working on video. You would think after all these months, I would know how to just do all this, but apparently not.
Well, this is a brave new world we're all in of meeting virtually, so it has not been without challenges. Imagine for everyone. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. I did not prepare remarks this time like I did last time. I spent most of my writing time preparing for the next meeting of the Awareness Task Force. I did want to share one thought that has come up for me since the last meeting, and perhaps is something we could speak about in member remarks and announcements, or if we don't have any other participants, it's maybe something we could add to the agenda for next time. And that was really thinking about the intersectional nature of our work in LGBTQ rights. You know, virtually every topic that we've touched here recently, whether it was the unsheltered survey or the pronoun discussion and meeting guidance, has had sort of an intersectional component where it has caused us to think more broadly and touch on other groups that may be affected by some of the same issues that LGBTQ people might be affected by. So I was curious if members of this task force, and I think it might even require a discussion at HRC more broadly, would be up for a discussion around whether we ought to think differently about our name. Rather than LGBTQ rights task force, should we maybe consider being the LGBTQ intersectional rights task force or something of that nature? And the reason was to keep intersectionality always at the forefront of our mind, as well as to allow us to explore more deeply issues where it's not always clear if it's just an LGBTQ access issue, but it's an access issue that affects other groups. So I wanted to raise that kind of in opening remarks. And like I said, depending on who shows up tonight, we can talk about it in some more depth, or we could table it and talk about it at an upcoming HRC meeting and at our next LGBTQ meeting. Yeah?
Yeah, very good.
All right, well, those comments said, let's just dive right into the agenda, and we'll do what we can without a quorum. I don't imagine you've received any public comment, Gretchen?
I have not, and I double checked my email just moments ago, so I've received no comment this time.
Okay. The next item is approval of minutes. We'll have to table that until we have a quorum. The next item is about the web page and organizational info. I have updates on 2 of the 3 organizations that I went out to, which is that both Capital Pride and Rainbow Youth would like to be included. And I will pass on that information. I wasn't quite sure, Gretchen, how to format the information best for you. Is it like we need a name and a URL and a description? Is that really what you need for each?
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that. It occurred to me later that a format would have made sense, so that, because I'm sure would like things to come in as consistently as we could. But yeah, don't you think maybe like a line or 2 of description of what the group is, the name of the group, and the URL? Yeah.
Great.
Hi,
I see
Tricarico.
Tricarico is here. Hello.
Sorry, I totally thought we were just meeting at 7 for awareness. And then I was like, that doesn't seem right. So I emailed Gretchen, and luckily she told me that we're meeting right now. So
all right.
Sorry, late.
It's all right. You know what? We dove right into the meeting. I made a couple comments, and the comment that I made was about a conversation. Actually, you and I have already talked about this, which is whether we want to discuss including intersectional in our name of our group. But you being here, just by virtue of you being you, reminded me that we did not follow our own protocols and introduce ourselves and our pronouns today. So we have this great opportunity to do a reset, if y'all don't mind. My name is Mike. I'm the chair of this task force, and my pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And I'll pass it to Tricarico.
Okay, I'm Tricarico. My pronouns are they, them. And I'll pass it to Alex.
I'm Alex and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, everybody. And my name is Gretchen Bennett, and I'm staff to the commission and she, her pronouns.
All right. Well, we went a little out of order, but that's okay. We got it in. We were just, Tricarico, when you joined us, talking about the organization info for the City of Salem website. I asked Gretchen about a format, and that's where you came in.
Okay.
And Gretchen, you had some thoughts. You maybe want to repeat those real quick?
Sure. I think, unless you disagree, simply the name of the organization and like a 1 or 2 sentence description, and, you know, or whatever the description feels right. Maybe we can be flexible with that. And then the URL would be lovely.
That sounds good.
So Mike, it sounds like Capital Pride and Rainbow Youth are happy to be included. That's awesome.
They're both in, and I have a note to the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Willamette Empire. It's quite a mouthful. And I haven't heard back, but as soon as I hear back, I'll let you know.
I had an overall question about the webpage. I was curious where you would imagine placing the information. I regret I could not figure out how to share a web page on Zoom. I see how to share my screen, but I couldn't figure out how to share a web screen. So I emailed you 2 different links in case that facilitates you checking. And you don't have to say tonight, but I'm wondering about input. One idea would be, you know, when you go to the city's equity and inclusion page, generally there's maybe 7 or 8 choices there. One of those choices is the Human Rights Commission. So you can click on that. And then from there, we could make an LGBTQ rights page and maybe load the content from our brochure and have the links of the organizations that we're collecting. A second idea would be, if you're on the city's equity page, another thing you can click on is something called Human Rights Resources. And when you click on that, you're going to find you can click by identity to learn of resources to help in case of discrimination. That was born out of a project that the Human Rights Commission did several years ago, where they wanted to make sure resources about helping were on the webpage. We could also maybe adapt that page and have it maybe more broadly collect organizations and not only organizations that help with discrimination. So I could see it going a couple directions and wanted to see if the committee had any input on that. And you can think about it and email me if you like. I can kind of go with the majority or however you want to pursue that.
Let me clarify. The question is, like, this is going to be a separate page, or is this going to be on one of those pages?
I think that's a choice too. Yeah,
Oh.
you could have it be part of one of those pages, or you could have a page built. Like, I was wondering if you built a page specifically for this task force, that might flow well off the Human Rights Commission, for example, and then have a like click here for the task force. And then that's like, yeah, I think we have some flexibility.
Okay, I'm looking at both and I'm just thinking.
Well, first of all, I did not know about the Human Rights Resources, and that is a great page that has a lot on it. It makes me curious whether we've done a good job of scrubbing that regularly and you know, as a commission, not as an LGBTQ organization, to make sure that those are up to date. But I do think the purpose of this is a little different.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of a community page. One of the things I was thinking about that I liked about us having a separate page is it just shows for anybody who's LGBTQ, who's maybe just moved to Salem or thinking about moving to Salem, it really shows that we have a vibrant community that is interested in interacting with them maybe. So I like the idea of a separate page, but I also, with the resource page, I wonder about, is that something we should maybe take on in awareness or in the broader HRC to make sure that that's updated as well. So I kind of think both, how I am. More is
No,
more.
I agree. Those are both really good observations.
Yeah.
Can we have it on both, Gretchen? Is there anything that says that we can't have information on both those pages?
My hunch would be that it probably lives on one, and then maybe on the other could reference it and link to it. I not being a web developer, I have the impression I have to place it in one place, but I could absolutely link to it from a second place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like since the resources page is for help with discrimination and the community page is really just about LGBTQ community, that if you linked from the resources page over to LGBTQ, like for a list of community groups, like that.
I like it. Okay, great.
Yeah, and I'm curious if I am kind of throwing another thing out here. Would we want to include only LGBTQ focused community groups, or would we want to list other community groups that support marginalized groups? Because like there is a pretty regular meetup, which I know they're on hiatus because of COVID, but for sign language users at Broadway Commons, for example, that I've gone to before, there may be other groups. So maybe that's something to think about too and bring to the commission. Like once we have this compiled, do we want to include other organizations? I mean, yeah, I'm all about, queer groups, obviously, but I bet there's probably other groups that might want to be included too.
Yeah, and if the resource page really is resources, if it really is focused on that discrimination piece, there's a culture piece that's missing. That's so rich and vibrant here within the city.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, really, it could be actually quite similar to that resources page where we have, different tabs for like different identities, right? Because like under the age tab, we could easily have like Center 50 plus listed as an option, for example. So if we kind of followed that format, I mean, that's again, probably more of a greater HRC / awareness project, but I'm thinking it'd be easy to duplicate what's there, and just change it to instead of discrimination. Here's like you said, culture might be a cool title for that. Like, here's about the culture in Salem, and here's different groups you can connect with.
Very good. Yeah.
Like all the salsa meetups. We should definitely put those on there. Oh my God. There's like 3. Okay. Again, pre-COVID, you could go salsa dancing like one night in Salem. I think that's really cool. And the community is really cool and really accepting, like, of queer folks too. So, there's a lot of cool things going on that we probably don't know about that maybe our commissioners know about that, could just be awesome to have on Salem. Like, hey, look at what Salem has.
So I do a fair amount of web work in my professional world, and I think well, 2 things. One, I do like the idea of a community page that is separate from the resources page because it's for different purposes, not mushing them together or anything like that because it's real different purposes. But the other thing I think is you can often do this work in phases. And maybe phase 1 is LGBTQ focused because we are queer and we often lead the way in in these kinds of worlds. But I also think it's something that we could easily replicate. Once done you can really kind of figure out how to get other community listings together. I really love this idea, so I don't have anything else to add, I guess.
One
I think
thing, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Alex,
I
please.
was just gonna say that sounds good, like phasing it out, because Gretchen, didn't you send out an email to the commission as a whole about different groups? And I think we all took on a couple that we would reach out to. That was, I think, part of the liaison plan, but it could totally work with this as well.
I did, Alex, you're right. Commissioners were invited to reach out and connect with different organizations across the identity spectrum. And that conversation, as you might remember, was a little more focused on, we're trying to understand what the barriers might be to accessing the complaint process. We want to be here to help remedy discrimination. So it was a more specific, but it could certainly, now once that conversation is started, we can easily follow up and add. One thing to point out as we think through this, and maybe to put into a phase 2, would be thinking through when you broaden the focus, criteria are really needed. Certainly as a public entity, if we're listing groups and community resources, you generally have to create the conditions to be able to, place all of the groups that fit that criteria. And like for example, we remember kind of some difficult conversations with the library last year. They offer a place where you can schedule rooms for use. Like you can schedule a room to use for a meeting room or an activity, but then of course, groups who may or may not fit the values of the library can also sign up for those rooms because it's a public resource. And we would hit the same thing. So if groups, like if we had a whole list of groups about race and ethnicity, for example, and then maybe there are some who see themselves in that vein, but others would say, no, that's counter to the values that we have. Like if one is culturally specific and then another culturally specific one shows up that doesn't feel as comfortable, I wonder how we'd navigate that. So the phasing creates time for us to consider those questions before we're faced with, hi, group X, that everyone's like, oh dear,
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because then you have to just take the whole thing down. You end up, because you have to have those as a public body. We have certain requirements.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a couple of threads that I really like. One is the connection to the liaison program, because by having a group directory listing, we have a natural touch base that would have to be at least annual in order to keep the directory updated. So I really like that. And then the second thread around criteria, it seems to me that the criteria would follow along with HRC's mission. And so it would be around groups that are listed in Chapter 97 in particular. Obviously, that currently doesn't include housing status, and so that's a concern because we would want to make sure that those types of resources for unsheltered people were available. But it's a good start around our focus around Chapter 97, because it would necessarily limit and I'll just say it more bluntly, it would limit a white supremacist group from having access to that resource.
Yeah.
I think that would be one of the things to carefully think through, because I see that conversation debated, it's like so we'd have to really, really parse that through and make sure that it would work for everybody.
Yeah.
I think a simple way would be the group has to be focused on a minority group, and white people are not the minority in the United States.
Oh,
Problem solved.
there you go.
And again, either minority or Chapter 97, and inclusive to all people, because obviously Nazis are not inclusive, so we can't have a Nazi group, right?
Yeah.
So I think those minority focused inclusive group would be pretty cut and dry, as far as trying to get someone to argue that we have to have a white supremacist or Nazi group on the page.
Thank you. Those are good points. I'm getting them down in the notes. Great.
But it sounds like this committee, or our little subcommittee of the committee, because we're not all here, is in favor of moving forward, at least on the LGBTQ community resources. So I think, and I don't know if you've heard from our other members about the ones that they were looking after, Gretchen, but when you have a sense for, and I'll send you my shoe for sure, but when you have a sense for if you have enough, because I think you do need, I don't know, more than 5 maybe.
Yeah.
Enough, I don't know what the threshold is, but when we do have enough, then would love to see us move forward on that page.
Great, I'm looking forward to it. And I'll send out notes to anybody I haven't heard from with that format we discussed to make sure I can get the info.
Great. And I'm happy to help with any titling or blurb copy or whatever you need on that page.
Thank you.
To you, yeah.
Do you think the brochure is kind of a beginning point to draw from?
It might be, but it might be a bit lengthy for web copy.
Thank you.
You know, like, it's just like with websites, people are really impatient. It's like, get me to my stuff, please.
Thank you for that, Mike. I hate when I look for a recipe and I get someone's like life story. And I'm like, I don't care about the brownies you had when you were 7. I just want the recipe. So thank you for making it short. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Yep. Well, do we have any further discussion on the web resources? I gotta go back to my here.
You are able to do minutes if you like. Your quorum is 3 because you need a majority and you have 5 seated members. So you've achieved quorum if you like.
Tricarico and Alex, did you get a chance to review the minutes?
No, let me go look.
About 3/4 of it was my statement.
Oh, okay, well, I approve that, that's for sure. Okay. Okay, looks good. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Me.
Aye. Any opposed?
Oh, sorry, I'm throwing this meeting way out of the loop. I'm not opposed.
Yeah, no opposition. Good. Our next topic was on the pronoun discussion and our recommendation that we were, and we did at HRC, I think you were both there, discuss it, and the HRC was very much behind the idea of us putting together some pronoun recommendations. And also we discussed a little bit about other accessibility concerns at meetings. It occurs to me that we don't have anybody who is deaf on our call today, but the proper way that we should be behaving in meetings by saying, this is Mike at the beginning of our, or this is my name at the beginning of our things is one of those protocols. And I'm sure that there's some others as well. What are our thoughts about next steps on that?
I wanted to add that Chair Angelo from the HRC asked if it would be possible to have a draft ready at the August meeting. And I said I would ask. I didn't know if that would be achievable. On the one hand, that's not much time because the meeting I think is August 4th. On the other hand, I think there's some resources out there that may be able to be culled from, and also you all certainly have lots of meeting experience and may be able to share your thoughts, and you can see it start to populate. So I wasn't sure. I said I'd ask your group tonight whether that was a doable timeline.
Is there a way we can share a document that we can all access? Like if all of us keep putting in our thoughts?
We haven't figured out how to do that in the public context yet, because the problem is that ends up being an experience of deliberating on something that's leading to a decision, yet isn't accessible to the general public. And so that's been our barrier so far. So far we haven't been able to work in that kind of Google Doc environment, which is regrettable because I know that is so convenient. What we could do is someone could draft something and then It could be emailed out, and then I can receive like one-way communication of edits and then bring the edited document to the meeting, for example. But I know that's more clunky.
And I know you're out next week, Gretchen, is that right? For the-
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
So if we were to pull something together, and our HRC meetings on Tuesday of the following week.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So it really sounds like it might need to be either by Friday of this week, or we'd be kind of scrambling on Monday of the week that you get back. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah. And I will be towing into email a little bit. I just didn't want to make that commitment. Our travel plans canceled, but I'm, and so I'll be probably peeking into email and doing things a little bit, but didn't want to be too committed.
So clarification, this is the recommendation just for pronouns, or is this recommendation for other protocols during a Zoom meeting in particular?
I think what I heard was that it would be kind of a set of recommendations for accessibility in meetings that would include sharing pronouns, maybe in verbal introductions as well as on the placards or on Zoom nameplates. It could include things like when you have ASL interpretation to please say your name at the beginning, and other tips that you may be aware of that help. There's the document that Krista Gallagher shared with us, which came out of the state of Oregon's diversity and equity and inclusion efforts, that's several pages that talks about accessible meetings. And that could be a really great resource to pull from as well. We certainly don't need to duplicate that. In fact, one idea might be to have a kind of a simple short list of, here are some simple recommendations, just a few bullet points, and then refer to that larger document, come to think of it. Krista had me forward that, and it was probably April or May. And I can locate that again. It was something she brought to our attention a while back.
I think from our task force, what we could do is advance specifically the recommendations on pronouns, and then use the broader HRC to maybe get input for other inclusive practices, since we're not really the experts in those practices, but maybe want to use the resources of the group to help bring those to light. That would be one way that we could approach it. I don't necessarily have in my world like a good pronoun cheat sheet that's short. The group that has come and talked to us a number of times has a sheet like that, but it's theirs and it's proprietary. And so I don't think I can steal it for this purposes, although the tips on it are pretty broad, around the why of sharing pronouns and the ways to politely correct yourself if you've made a mistake. Tricarico, do you have any of those kinds of resources on hand, like from Rhodes Perry or anything like that?
I don't, but I haven't specifically asked for that, so I could put out a call. There's a couple that we've shared at work that are a little bit more brief, like in a newsletter. So I might see if I can find some of those. I was thinking like, top 3 recommendations would be like, use your pronouns when you introduce yourself at the beginning, put your pronouns, or Gretchen can put them on our name placards, and then put them in your Zoom name. Like, those could be like our top 3, and then that's what we present to the main meeting. And then if there's other things that folks want to add for other accessibility issues, I think that would about cover it for pronouns. I guess where would the resources come into that then, I guess? On like why we use them and stuff like that.
I guess that's a good point. I think if I remember the commission meeting discussion, it was contemplated that beyond the Human Rights Commission, this could be a letter from the commission that's offered, to the other boards and commissions. And so then it would come with a little bit of kind of education and context. And suggestions, you know, if somebody's newer to the conversation, like the stuff on, hey, if you find someone's made a mistake, correct and move on. You know, you might consider making it voluntary. Some people may not be at a place where they'd like to share them. You know, here's how you handle that. I think it was a little bit of coaching tips idea.
Okay, that's good. I'm sending myself an email right now because I guarantee you that when I get into work tomorrow, even though, you know, getting into work is going to the next room, I won't remember. So I'm sending myself an email to find those resources and send them to Gretchen. Because I do agree that when we are introducing it to other boards, it would be helpful to have a best practice as well as one around what happens when someone uses the wrong pronoun, like a quick, hey, you know, here's the best way to approach that.
Yeah, I have some resources from work as well, which I can send to you, Gretchen.
Thank you.
But if we were presenting this to other boards, then maybe for that document, we need some more time to kind of like look at it, look at all our resources together and all of us figure out what the best ones are. So maybe we do the top 3 that Ricardo was suggested to and present it to the HRC on August 4th and make that the bigger coaching tips document for the next September meeting.
Sounds really reasonable. What do you all think?
Yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds great.
Great.
I wonder if we're going out to other boards and commissions where maybe people don't have as much experience with these issues around accessibility and proper identification of folks, if we might even want to expand some of those educational resources. Specifically, I think specifically on pronouns, that sometimes people just have a stunning lack of awareness of the fact that it's even an issue, and why it might be an issue. So I think the direction that we have is really good, like pulling the resources that you all have. Like I said, I think my resource is proprietary, so I can ask the people who put on that workshop if they'll let me share it. And then talking about it again at HRC with a more finite recommendation in September sounds really good to me.
Yep, that sounds good.
Sounds good.
Anything else on this this topic? Gretchen, is there any update on the unsheltered services?
I did. Here's where, let me see where I was in figuring out how to share my screen. No and yes. On the one hand, no, in that I haven't actually released the survey yet, but yes, in the fact that I took the survey that we all edited back in March and reviewed some of the conversations that we've had since then and kind of edited it. So I wanted to get additional feedback on how the questions are phrased and if they're done right. And then what I thought I would do, last month we were thinking about kind of forming a committee through the regional structure, and it occurred to me that this could be simplified rather than a committee, and I could just simply share the survey. The longer I'm interacting with the different organizations and things, I think that one approach could be to simply share the survey. And I thought that it would make sense to offer it in a SurveyMonkey format, but also offer people an option if they'd rather have a conversation instead. Because I recognize some of the questions can be a little difficult to answer if you might have a lawyer hat on, for example. Like people might think, goodness, if I answer this question or that question, would it somehow reflect a lack of compliance? And that might worry. And so I wanted to offer an alternative to a written document, and maybe people would be more comfortable kind of having a conversation and sharing some of their challenges and reflections. So if that's okay, I don't know if you'd like me to take a second and try to figure out how to share the screen, or if you would prefer, I could also just email you the survey and invite you to give me your comments on it again. You've done that before, but it's gotten a few good edits to it. And since I won't be able to execute it next week anyway, you could take the week and look at it, and then maybe I can execute in August. I've been telling people in the unsheltered community about how we're interested in surveying, and it's starting to feel like people could, I think that there's some, I think it might be a good time to go ahead and release it too.
I'd be okay with looking at it over email. How about you two?
Yeah, that's fine.
That works.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm gonna make a note to email you it. And then if you wouldn't mind maybe getting your comments back to me by August, the beginning of August, then in August, I'll plan on releasing it.
Okay.
Great. And that's all I've got on that topic.
Well, that takes us to our last topic, which is member remarks and announcements. I already made remarks at the beginning of the meeting around wanting to explore a name that included intersectional for our task force. We can certainly discuss that now. If you all are warm to the idea, we can also take it to the Human Rights Commission on August 4th and see what the broader commission thinks about that idea. But I would open it up for discussions about that or any other member remarks or announcements that folks have.
I like the idea, but just have a question for Gretchen. Gretchen, do we need the HRC, like a vote or a formal approval to change the name, or can we just go ahead and do it?
You know, it's probably appropriate to bring it back to the HRC because subcommittees are formed by the HRC, and a name change can reflect a shift in scope. So it strikes me as appropriate to, like, you could recommend to HRC the name scope change and then have them ratify it. That strikes me as, that's how I'd interpret the bylaws. Yeah.
Are we simply asking to add the word intersectional to the existing name, or?
That's what I thought.
Okay.
Maybe not LGBTQ intersectional rights, because that sounds weird, but just maybe LGBTQ intersectional task force. And rights are sort of, my thought was that, well, we're the Human Rights Commission, so rights is there. And so that was kind of my thinking. And really it just came out of the discussion last time and how much of our work starts to connect in, as well as maybe sending a signal to underrepresented communities that do intersect with LGBTQ that they're very welcome here. That was the other reason I thought of it, is just like, yeah, I want, any LGBTQ person to know that if their main issues are not around being LGBTQ, but they're around other types of access issues or discrimination, that this is still a place that that they could come and share their information. So that was kind of my thinking.
I like that thinking because, anytime I've talked to a member of the queer community about something they're experiencing, it's never just about being queer. It's about someone who experiences a disability, someone who is also a person of color. There's just so many things that come into play. So I think that's really important. I also think it might be nice to add at least a plus to LGBTQ or update the acronym to the LGBTQIA+. I think is the most recent one. I realize we could probably update indefinitely as we find more acronyms, but I think at least a plus would be worth considering, just because the human understanding of sexuality and gender keeps expanding, and I want to honor that and help people see that we are staying up to date with the issues that are coming into the community, because every time a new identity is welcomed in, it brings new challenges and new opportunities, and I want to honor that.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that. A couple of years ago when I was on the board of Rainbow Youth, we asked the youth about what the letter should be. And they came back with LGBTQIAP+. plus.
Oh my gosh, see, that's going to be the challenge is like, how many things do we add?
I know, right? But I love our youth for that, you know,
Yes.
their understanding of the world is broadened by their experiences and their ability to tap into something really fresh and exciting and new is so exhilarating in that way. So I definitely think the plus is a must, and I think IA is used quite a lot more, and those communities that are represented by those letters, I think do seek voice in our community. So if we're truly intersectional, I would suggest it's a little bit of a mouthful, but LGBTQIA plus intersectional task force really has a ring to it.
I think so too. I like it. We're going to change the name. We might as well like get everybody in there.
Like, go for it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Go
Yeah.
for it. But
I like
the
it.
challenges of people who use the I and A identifiers are significant, and they are significant within our community. It's not just that they may experience challenges with the outside world, but to feel rejected from your own community is very hurtful. And so maybe calling those two groups out specifically lets them know that they've got a voice.
I agree.
Well, it sounds like our mini quorum has a recommendation then that we'll take to the HRC. Cool.
Since I missed it, did we have any public comments?
We did not.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Well, I know at least 3 of us are going to be in the 7 o'clock awareness group meeting. So unless there are other remarks and announcements, maybe we should go ahead and adjourn this one. Take a quick break. All right, sounds good. I think the meeting's adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Everyone,
Bye.
bye.